Hello, my name is Jones, and today I've come with a lesson to do with menstruation, and I also try to talk about fertilization within this lesson. Okay, so this lesson is in the series of integrated reproductive health lessons that we are trying to have in our online programs. Okay, so let us define what is meant by menstruation. Menstruation is a woman's monthly bleeding, also called a period. When a woman menstruates, her body is shedding the lining of the uterus, or sometimes called the womb. So it's shedding the lining of the uterus. Menstrual blood flows from the uterus through the small opening in the cervix and passes out of the body through the vagina. Most menstrual periods last from 3 to 5 days. Menstruation is part of the menstrual cycle, which prepares the body for pregnancy each month. A cycle is counted from the first day of one's period to the first day of the next period. Okay, so that's how we calculate menstruation. That is, a cycle is counted from the first day of one's period to the first day of the next period. The average menstrual cycle is 28 days long. Cycles can range anywhere from 21 to 35 days in adults and from 21 to 45 days in younger teens. All these variation may be associated with hormones, okay, stability, and the likes. Menstrual or uterine cycle consists of three phases. There is the proliferative phase, which describes the thickening of the endometrium of the uterus, replacing tissues that were lost during the previous menstrual cycle, proliferating to proliferate, so proliferative phase. So we are just looking at the thickening of the endometrium of the uterus as it replaces the lost tissue from the last menstrual cycle. The secretory phase. This follows ovulation and describes further thickening and vascularization of the endometrium in preparation for the implantation of a fertilized egg. So secretory phase, it is in line with ovulation. Okay, and during a secretory phase, we are still having the thickening and increased blood vessels being formed within the endometrium as it is thickening. Menstrual phase or menstruation or menses. This describes the shading of the endometrium when implantation does not occur. So if implantation has not occurred, menstruation occurs. Okay, so physiology of menstruation. The activities of the ovary and the uterus are coordinated by negative and positive feedback responses involving gonadotropin releasing hormone, okay, abbreviated GnRH, from the hypothalamus, follicle stimulating hormone FSH, and luteinizing hormone LH from the anterior pituitary, and the hormones estrogen and progesterone from the follicle and corpus luteum. A description of the event follows like in this diagram. Okay, so we have the secretion of the anterior pituitary hormones, the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and their levels in blood. Okay, so that is how they have been shown. And these, they have been married with the phases. Okay, so we have the follicular phase, which is the combination of menstrual phase and the proliferative phase. And then we have the luteal phase, which is the secretory phase. Okay, Then at the middle there, we have the ovulation. So the hormones there have been shown. So ovarian cycle, okay, ovarian cycle, that is development of the ovarian follicle. There we have the antrium, we have the primary, the secondary, and the mature their follicle. Then it releases the ovary during ovulation. Okay, so the secreted phase there. So the ovary has been released, and then there is increased endometrium there at the bottom, the endometrium level. So when the the mature follicle releases the ovary there, we have the zonal pellucida there, the coronal radiata, and the likes there, which is releasing. So then we have the yellow body, the corpus luteum. So the yellow body there, okay, that thing continues to produce progesterone. Okay, then secretion of the ovary or follicles and the corpus luteum there, we have there estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone levels, and on top there we have luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone levels from the anterior pituitary gland. Then uterine cycle changes in the thickness. That is, we have the menstrual phase, the proliferative phase, okay, and then the secretory phases. So this is how the cycle moves in collaboration with the hormones, their levels. Okay, so the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary initiates the reproductive cycle. The hypothalamus monitors the levels of estrogen and progesterone in the blood. In a negative feedback fashion, low levels of these hormones stimulate the hypothalamus to secrete gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which in turn stimulates the anterior pituitary to secrete follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the development of the follicle from a primary through to mature stage. Then luteinizing hormone stimulates the cells of the thicker internal and the granulosa cells of the follicle to secrete estrogen. Positive feedback from rising levels of estrogen stimulates the anterior pituitary, that is through the gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, to produce a sudden mid-cycle surge of luteinizing hormone. These high levels of luteinizing hormone stimulates meiosis in the primary oocyte to progress towards prophase 2 and triggers ovulation. After ovulation, the follicle, now transformed into corpus luteum, continues to develop under the influence of luteinizing hormone, and it is going to secrete both estrogen and progesterone. The endometrium thickens. Estrogen and progesterone stimulate the development of the endometrium, and it thickens with nutrient-rich tissue and blood vessels in preparation for the implantation of a fertilized egg. Negative feedback from the high levels of estrogen and progesterone cause the anterior pituitary, that is through the hypothalamus, to abate the production of follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone, inhibiting also or suppresses production of follicle stimulating and luteinizing hormone. The endometrium now disintegrates and the blood flows from the uterus to the outside through the vagina. This then is termed as the menstruation, and then the cycle has to start again. However, if fertilization occurs, the endometrium is maintained as follows. The implanted embryo secretes human chorionic gonadotropin to sustain the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum continues to produce estrogen and progesterone, maintaining the endometrium. That is the pregnancy test mostly that we do. We test for HCG in urine. In addition to influencing the reproductive cycle, estrogen stimulates the development of secondary sex characteristics in a female. These include the distribution of adipose tissue, that is to the breast, hips, and mons pubis. Bone development leading to a broadening of the pelvis, changes in voice quality, and the growth of various body hair is influenced by this same hormone. Okay, so now with the menstruation explained, let us now look also at fertilization. Pregnancy is a sequence of events that normally includes fertilization, implantation, embryonic growth, and fetal growth, and that will terminate into birth. Okay, so here we have an illustration growth of the fetus. Okay, from 14 days. Okay, 14 days there, 24 days, 4 weeks. Okay, 6.5 weeks and the likes, and then we have big fetus there at 15 weeks. So fertilization refers to the joining together of the ovum, okay, or egg, and the sperm cells. The ovum originates in the Graafian follicle within the ovary. The sperm cell originates in the testis. The macroscopic union of sperm and ovum increases in size more than 20 billion times from conception to birth. During sexual intercourse, 2 to 5 ml of semen, usually containing more than 300 million sperm, is ejaculated into the female's vagina. By flagella or wiggly movement, the sperm make their way through the fluids of the cervical mucus, across the endometrium, and into the fallopian tube to meet the descending ovum in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Only one sperm is required for actual fertilization, but the presence of many increases the chances for one to penetrate. The union between the ovum and the sperm occurs in the outer third of the fallopian tube. The combined ovum and sperm, referred to as the zygote, begins rapid cell division and in 2 to 3 days becomes a structure referred to as a morula. The morula is a rapidly growing structure and reaches the uterus in approximately 4 days. So here we have a diagram representation of the path of the sperm and the egg cell. Okay, so we have the vagina, the cervix, seminal fluid is deposited within the vagina during coitus. It will go through the uterus in there, pass through the uterine tubes, okay, then meet the egg cell somewhere in the ampulla. So that is in the ampulla there. So the path of the egg there, the path of the egg from the ovary there, and also it has been shown. Process of implantation. The morula floats in the uterus for 3 to 4 days, gaining in size and weight. At this time, the hollow fluid filled morula, now called blastocyst, burrows into the uterine lining. The outer surface of the blastocyst becomes covered with finger-like projection called the chorionic villi. Chorionic villi aid in the process of implantation into the endometrium, or now it will be called the seedwall. The villi also manufacture human chorionic gonadotrophin (HCG), which signal the corpus luteum within the ovaries to continue the production of progesterone and estrogen to prevent menstruation or to maintain the endometrial lining. The implantation normally occurs in the upper posterior wall of the uterus. The point of implantation becomes the origin for the placenta and umbilical cord. So the events of implantation are here more clearly. There we have the ovary, ovulation. Okay, the ovary is released fertilization being the ampulla, then the cleavage, the morula, then as it reaches the uterus, okay, now with the lesser fluid in it, so then we call it a blastocyst, then the implantation will happen. So remember the endometrium that is on the outermost there, the decidua, parentalis, and myometrium there within the uterus. So the umbilical cord lifeline connects the fetus to the placenta, and it contains the umbilical vein and two umbilical arteries. So when we talk of functions of the placenta, we are looking at the umbilical cord lifeline as it connects the fetus to the placenta for exchange of oxygen, and also contains the umbilical vein and the two umbilical arteries. Okay, so knowledgeable of the placenta functions, you can also give insight into the prenatal life and its helpfulness in providing nursing care to the unborn and the newborn. Okay, so the infant also excretes other products through the placenta, then to the mother. The placenta functions as a transport mechanism between the embryo and the mother. Also, the placenta has many tasks as it transports oxygen, nutrients, and antibodies to the fetus by means of the umbilical vein, and removes carbon dioxide and the metabolic waste from the fetus by the two umbilical arteries. It also serves as a protective barrier against harmful effects of certain drugs and microorganisms, and also act as a partial barrier between the mother and fetus to prevent fetal and maternal blood from mixing. Placenta also produces hormones essential for maintaining pregnancy. The hormones are estrogen, progesterone, and human chorionic gonadotropin. So it is acting as an endocrine gland at some point. Okay, so we were looking at the menstrual cycle, and we have also talked about fertilization and implantation in this lesson. Okay, so when we talk about the menstrual cycle, we have looked at the phases of the menstrual cycle. Okay, we have talked about the phases of the menstrual cycle being the proliferative phase, okay, the secretory phase, then the menstrual phase. Then the physiology of menstruation. This activity is controlled by the negative and positive feedback, okay, involving the gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Then we have the other hormones that are involved, the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Okay, so we talked about the diagrammatic representation of what is happening during menstruation, where we have talked about the levels of luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, and we have also tried to highlight the levels of estrogen and progesterone. Then we have also related this with the thickness of the endometrium. Okay, so yes, so we tried to relate all that, and then we went on to discuss the things that are happening during these stages and the hormones and the roles that they are playing. Then we went on to look at fertilization, okay, the development of the fetus there, and we talked about the path of sperm and egg cells, and then the process of implantation. So that has been our lesson. Please, we have also talked about the functions of the placenta. So I urge you to study more on this so that you can understand and the amplification of these lessons. Thank you very much, and stay blessed.